Welcome to Finding You Now. I'm your host, Amanda Ashworth, and on today's show, we have Dr. Laura Froyen. Laura is a parenting coach and also a fellow podcaster with a podcast called The Balanced Parent. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to share my story a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So do you want to start by telling the audience, your background and what you trained in?
Yeah, so I have my PhD in human development and family studies with a specialization in marriage and family therapy. I was a professor for a couple of years, went through grad school, did my clinical work, and I love working with parents. So most of my research focused on how the home emotional environment, the marriage, kind of family relationships, how those things impacted children's early academic development. And now I get to, so I left academia. That's kind of part of my story. But I left academia to find more balance for myself and for my family. And now I support moms and dads in finding kind of their way to parenting really authentically and in a very connected way to themselves and to their partners and to their kids.
Yeah, and one of the things you can help parents do is reparent, so kind of relearn
Yeah.
and yeah, okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
And so what kind of led you to have that interest in parenting?
I mean, gosh, we're going way back. I mean, so I started wanting to work with families right after high school. I noticed, I had kind of gathered around me a group of friends that had different home lives than the one I had. I have parents who have been married for 53 years now. Not a lot of conflict, really a pretty good setting. There were things, that my parents didn't get 100% right because all parents are, you know, imperfect human beings. There were definitely things that I talk about with my parents now that we're working on healing our relationships. But I did notice that there were aspects of my life that were easier because I had some real stability and closeness in my family. And I was really interested in supporting families. I also got really interested in child development. And the more I read, the more I realized that kind of the bigger impact I could have would be to focus on parenting. If I wanted to really improve kids' lives, the parents are the most impactful people in their world. And so helping them would allow me to help more kids.
And what are the common issues that kind of parents come to you for?
Oh, kids not listening, parents losing their temper, or feeling like they're losing their cool or needing to kind of raise their voice or raise their energy in order to get their kids to listen. Um, those are the big things, or kind of just some distressing behaviors and not really being able to figure out why the kids are doing the things that they do. And then the other one is getting on the same page. So as a marriage and family therapist by training, I help a lot of couples kind of talk about their pasts, their histories, what they thought parenting was going to be like, how they thought they were going to be as parents, and come to alignment on some of those issues.
Yeah, so I'm a mum of three, and I was reading through your website earlier, and I was like, oh, I could do with Laura's help. There was so much that with each one of my children. So listening is definitely not the strongest point, but
Well, I mean, Amanda, can I just say for a
yeah.
second there, we all need help.
Mm.
I think that modern parents have this idea that because there's so much information out there, that we are supposed to just be able to gather that information and filter through it and make it make sense for ourselves and put it into practice. And that's not really how the human animal works. We know as parents that when we're raising our kids, that modeling is one of the most important things for them, right? They see us be polite and then they're polite. That we're social learners as human beings. And so that doesn't just stop when it comes to be learning how to be a parent. And we're supposed to be doing this. We were biologically and evolutionarily promised a village. Like, that's the human animal is supposed to be raised in a village. And we don't have that as modern parents. All we see are the highlight reels on Instagram and the kind of the best case scenarios. We don't see the messy stuff. We don't get to, we didn't, as kids, grow up watching our older cousins become parents and, watching our grandparents mentor them. Like, this just isn't the way that we do things anymore. And so we all need mentors. We all need guides.
But I think also in this last generation, so when I was growing up, it seemed to be very, we were almost pushed out of the door. We were out to play, and there was no kind of eggshells around us at all. We were free and we were wild. And now there seems to be quite a lot of pressure on
Mm,
parenting.
so much. So much pressure, so much there's so much more available to kids these days. And I really think that kids are still quite simple creatures and they really need quite simple lives. But there's, my husband and I were just talking about this. We both grew up in really small farming communities and we live in what, to us feels like a very big town. It's not, but it feels very big. And there's just so much that we didn't have access to, dance classes and sporting teams and just all sorts of stuff that we just didn't have access to. And what our kids want to do? They want to stay home and play outside or play dragons. Like, that's what
Yeah.
they want to do. And so we're in the space of like having access to so much more. And really what they want still is that simple play outside. My husband and I both grew up playing outside on our farms. And
Yeah.
that's, out the door, out you go.
Yeah, and you were seen at dinner time, and
Yeah.
life was very simple and very happy. Now that it is, as I say, a bit more that we almost feel like we need to fill up all of our children's time. And
Mm-hmm.
like I know, so I have three children. They're all very different ages. So I have a nearly 15-year-old, and I have a 5-year-old, and I have a 3-year-old. So
Whew.
it's almost good that I can see not necessarily the mistakes I made with my 15-year-old, but like, for example, he has tried, I think, every instrument, small extracurricular activity, which now I look at it and I'm just like, how much money did we waste and how much time did I spend? So for my 5 and my 3-year-old, I'm like, well, they can do one activity if they want. And, because they're actually really tired and they need their downtime.
They do. There's so much good research too. I love using research to back up our intuition, right? So you're having an intuitive hit about your kids. They need that downtime. You're so right. Then the research tells us that, American kids, this is the research, the population that I spend a lot of time researching. American kids are way too overscheduled and that it's not good for them. So
Yeah.
good. I'm glad you're building padding and downtime into your kids' lives.
And so when they are over scheduled, what are the kind of problems that tend to come up for them?
They experience chronic stress in similar ways that we do. They can experience burnout. Their nervous systems get taxed. We hear a lot about chronic stress and how kind of hard that load is on our bodies. So it's starting younger for them. They can also experience more anxiety too, more behavioral problems at school, being tired. And they also can be really so one of the things that happens for kids who are overscheduled is that they don't know how to be. They don't know how to slow down. They don't necessarily know how to move through a period of boredom with
Mm.
grace. And so it can be really difficult when they find themselves with an hour or two and to fill. They don't necessarily know what to do with themselves. And of course, if you've ever heard a kid who's bored, been
Yeah.
around a 6-year-old who's bored, it's hard because they want you to fix it for them because they're used to being scheduled. And so being able to occupy yourself is an important skill, to have. Human grown-ups don't use that skill very often. We have our smartphones. And so when we're bored, we just pull it up and start
Yeah.
scrolling. But it's a really important skill to learn how to just sit and be in your own boredom. That's where creativity blossoms. That's where some of the best games come from, but they can't come from our suggestion and they can't happen when we've got everything scheduled. So I definitely believe in leaving at least a few blocks of time, of unscheduled time, and then resisting the urge to rescue the kids, because I know it's hard when they're telling them that they're bored. It's it's easy, when you want to rescue them, but they need the boredom.
Well, in my house, normally boredom turns to fighting. So that's kind of sometimes, but then it can turn to these beautiful snippets of just incredible imaginative play. And then they're the
Yeah.
moments that I'm like, okay, we can ignore the arguing and we can just focus on
Right.
this
We have to take
incredibly.
the good and the bad, right?
Yeah. Do you find like now there's so much more pressure on us to be perfect parents?
Mm. I think parents have always had it hard, especially moms. But I think that the lens through which we're examined is so much more detailed right now for us. I think we know, or we think we know, so much more about what other people are doing, even though we don't, right? We see into so many people's lives. And, if you think about it, parenting as a verb is still pretty brand new, right? So that started to be used as a verb in last century. Just it's not very old. And so our grandparents didn't even have parenting as a verb to use in that way, and so it's still very new. And yeah, there's a lot of pressure on us. And I think we one of the things that I always start with in every single class that I teach, every time I get started on teaching something online or working with a family, is starting with self-compassion. That's a skill that you can exercise, a muscle that you can develop. And our world is really good at letting that muscle atrophy, right? Learning to be hard on ourselves. Most of us were raised in a way where you get to be more successful or more productive through, positive reinforcement or negative consequences.
Yeah.
And so we're hard on ourselves when we make mistakes. And so learning to be compassionate is, I think, absolutely critical. And it's super important, especially if you're finding yourself in that space of feeling like you're failing at everything, or you feel like you're just dropping all the balls, you're not doing well in any of the hats that you wear. The first step is always self-kindness.
Yeah. And I think that, so I work with a lot of women who are just overwhelmed.
Mhm.
That's probably the main. And they take on the mental
Mm,
role that they take on. The mental load is incredible. And but because they're almost sometimes repeating history. And I think this is the thing with becoming a parent as well. We're not, there's no textbook for it. So we know the way that we were raised, and you don't necessarily plan to become a parent and really set out with an intention of, I'm going to be this kind of parent. And so when you get there and you're in a position where you're juggling work, children, household, husband, it can be difficult.
I think it's so hard. And it makes sense too that figuring out who we want to be as parents is really hard. And in the moment with our kids, when things are stressful, our moms or our dad's voice kind of falls out of our mouths, not because we're bad or because, even we're making mistakes, but just because that's how we've been programmed to handle those situations. And those are moments where you can't know that that's going to be a trigger for you. You can't know that that's going to be a place where work needs to happen until you're in it. So I think even the people who maybe do have the foresight and the forethought to sit down and really think about how they want to be as parents, you can't know until you're in it. You can't know how you're going to handle a situation until you're actually in it. And sometimes it takes being kind of in the moment to highlight, where you have work to do. I really think it's important to view our kids as mirrors. They hold up these mirrors to us and show us exactly where we have work to do. And they're our greatest partners, because without them, we just wouldn't do that work. I think what a blessing that they're there to show us where the work is. It doesn't mean it's their job to fix us. It's
No.
just, they just along in the process of being themselves. They shine a light where we have old wounds or shadowy bits that we aren't sure if we love, and that's our job to do the healing work for ourselves.
So I have two girls, and I am very aware that how much, as I say, this kind of good girl syndrome comes in, and how much that I don't want them to. So, however much sometimes I would really love for them to be compliant. And there are points when they're pushing back that actually they need their voice, and I don't ever want them to feel suppressed and that their needs don't matter. And how can we go about listening to our children more?
Oh gosh. Well, I think you're making a really good first step there, Amanda, because you're recognizing that as much as I want a compliant and obedient child, I really don't. And I think it's so important to remember too that if we want a kid who will push back, push on unjust rules or question fairness, that if we want a child who will grow up to be that adult who's really going to step up for themselves and step up for people, they have to learn how to do that in a safe environment first, right? It's really risky to do that at school or, with a church leader. It's risky to do that outside of the home. And so it's much safer to do that with us. And so having a spirit of, I don't have to love this, but I am going to welcome it. I don't have to love this right now, but I am going to welcome it because she's getting this practice. She needs this practice. She needs to know that her words have value and have power, and that the most important person in her life is going to stop and listen when she holds up a hand to say this something isn't working. The next step then is to slip into curiosity. So, we go through our lives thinking we know so much when we don't. We assume a lot, and that's part of our brains. The human brain is fascinating to me, and it really likes being efficient, right? So the brain is really good at jumping to conclusions because it's moving really fast because it wants to be efficient. And so part of the practice is learning to slow it down and drop into curiosity with your child. So let's say, for example, you're getting ready to go to school, and normally it's a smooth and easy process, but for some reason this kid is not stopping playing and getting their shoes on. And normally it's fine, but for some reason today it's not. It can be super easy to get frustrated and flustered and think they're just being defiant. They're lollygagging around. They just want to keep playing. But if we drop into curiosity, come over, get close to them and say, hey, buddy, I've asked a couple times for you to get your shoes on, but it's not happening. What's going on? Then we often get a little bit of a flood of information. I've got a quiz at school today, or so-and-so was mean to me yesterday and I don't want to see them. And it just takes us softening and coming lower onto their, not just lower physically, but lower kind of energetically into their space, and making sure that they feel safe and comfortable. And I think that's the other thing too, is that when we ask them to share with us, then we actually have to be good listeners. Yeah. We have to be listening to understand, not listening to respond. You know what I mean?
Do you think now then that sometimes, because of how busy life is, that, as I say, taking that time to listen and to really connect with your child is almost lost sometimes because of the lives that we live?
I think that it is tempting to think of it that way. I think it's tempting to slip into a place of, I've got to get to work. We've got to get the drop off done. I was supposed to run and pick up cleaning before I went to work, and now I'm not going to have time. It's easy to slip into those things. And when we do that, when our kid is resisting us, I'm still on this, getting ready for school, because I know that that's such a hard time for so many families. When they are resisting us getting out the door and we're putting all this pressure on to get out because we've got this whole big adult agenda, it actually, in my experience with my own personal kids, it takes longer to get out the door than it would if I had, the second I noticed that resistance, if I was tuned into it and understood what that resistance was, that it had value, that it was communicating something to me, And the second I drop into curiosity, it usually goes much faster. So we think we have to rush and cajole and get them moving and kind of push forward, and that will save us time. But oftentimes it actually takes longer. I know the times when I've slipped into the mentality of we've got to get out of the house. You're going to be late for school. We end up taking longer than those moments of, you don't want to go to school today? Normally you're so happy to go. What's going on?
Yeah.
That usually gives me 3 minutes of cuddling and then we're out the door, versus 15 minutes of cajoling and tantruming. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, my middle child is being prompt is never going to be, I think, her strong point. That she's just, I have one child that will be ready to be out the door almost as soon as she wakes up, and then one child that just likes to potter, and she doesn't kind of. And I think it's what I feel quite often, and this is what I almost have to check myself about, is sometimes the adult expectations we have for children.
Yeah, absolutely. How is
So,
that ringing true for you right now?
um, So I have to remind myself sometimes that certain things that I want to do or I want us to do as a family aren't fun for them. And so, or I'm expecting them to respond in the way that I would expect them to respond or I would respond. And they're just not these little robots that
They're not. I think being aware of differing agendas is so important. Amanda, it sounds like your girls are so lucky to have a mom who's thinking about these things. And,
yeah.
and
But
even
then
if we're just,
there's still stuff. So for example, I grew up in a very shouty household. And I can completely understand it now. My mum was a single mum of four who was doing her best. But and now I think about the kind of self-care, there was no self-care. So I can completely imagine where she was at most of the time. But there are traits sometimes where, especially I think as I get older, that I could be a little bit more patient. And it's more that I'm sometimes expecting them to work to my agenda as opposed to and fit in with that, as opposed to just kind of they are three and five and they're going to do what they want to do.
yeah. I wonder too, I don't know, you mentioned the kind of the reparenting piece a
Yeah.
little bit. I know for me, and I wonder if it's true for you, in those moments where I'm noticing myself being kind of like the parent that I maybe didn't want to be like,
Mm.
I often know that that's for me is a moment where I need to be reparented a little bit, that there's a little one inside me who is worried about the circumstances that we're in. So if I would have gotten, you know, very much growing up, we were always, my one parent in particular liked to be 10 minutes early to everything. And if you weren't early, you were late and you were rude. And that was the worst thing that you could possibly do. So much so that he often got there so early and he didn't really know that getting there some places too early is also rude. And that wasn't passed down to us. But there was a lot of anxiety. And so when we're running late as a family now, there's a little 5-year-old Laura inside me who's really nervous about this. Dad's going to be mad. We're going to get in trouble. We're all going to be rude. People are going to think things about us. She's worrying about all of these little narratives that got handed to her that
Mm.
probably weren't true to begin with, and that she filtered through a 5-year-old mind. And so when that's all happening, I have to be very conscious and aware and close to her. So taking a second just to put my hand on my heart and notice, yep, 5-year-old Laura's right there. Sweetheart, don't worry. We're, you have a new mom. There's a new mom around. There's a new dad. Grandpa is, these kids' grandpa isn't here right
Mm.
now. And he's a different person now too. He won't mind, because this really, really comes up when we're late to meet my parents. That's really the only time that it comes up. Grandpa is a different person now. He won't mind waiting a few minutes for the girls to get their shoes on. It's a lot of self-talk. And so that's reparenting in the moment. And that can shift everything. And it can really take that kind of that tight, anxious feeling that I get
Yeah.
when we're running late and just soothe it away. And then I'm able to actually be myself and not like have a 5-year-old in me running the show and
Yeah.
hurrying the kids. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in our house, I'm the one that either likes to be early or on time. And then my partner runs on his completely own time schedule. So I've learned that the more the pressure I put on, the later we are going to be for something. So it's just kind of just start early and then we might get out and get on there on time for somewhere.
I have a kid like that, and she was literally 10 days late, like 10 days past her due date. And she's been that way her entire life. The more you push, the more she digs her heels in.
So that was exactly the same with all three of mine. So my son, who is very, I've kind of said from about the age of about 1, he's going to be an insurance auditor. He likes rules. And if there aren't rules, he makes his own rules. But he was early. My middle child, who is the one that is always late, was 4 days late.
Nice.
And then the very prompt child was the one that was born on her due date and just kind
That's
of flew out.
wild.
And it actually very much suits their personalities. And where I have one child that really loves rules, and then I have 2 children that just rules are not there, that do not apply to them. Um, how do parents kind of embrace kind of spirited children?
Oh, yeah. So the spirited kids, man, they're the ones who are here to wake us up and shake us up and make us question the status quo, right? So oftentimes the kids who think the rules don't apply to them really just don't understand the meaning or the value of the rule. And once they have it explained to them in a way that has their buy-in or in a way that's collaborative, they're fine with whatever it is. So if it's, what is like, can I ask just what is one rule that they challenge or that they would rather didn't exist?
Homework is a big thing
Okay.
in our house, and we're going through a bit of, or this year's been a bit of a transition. So with my eldest child, we've homeschooled for the last 8 years,
Okay.
and we moved to the UAE last year, and so that was a good time to try school. And so because there was part of me that didn't want to inflict my opinions and my views on my children, so I wanted to give them a chance,
Mhm.
because they are different from their brother. But at the same time, there is a part of me that I want them to be children and I don't want the battle. So homework, for example, with my middle child would always be a battle.
Okay. And the homework, is that so? This is your 5-year-old, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the homework? So this is coming home from a outside the house from a school, right?
Yeah, outside of, there's part of me that feels it's unnecessary there, and
Mm-hmm.
that's so there's some resistance from my part that
Yeah.
that I'm like, do I need to do this? And it almost takes the joy out of reading, because we battle on that, and then actually, like, so I kind of
Yes.
wish that actually the reading was done separately,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was maybe just a different subject that she had homework for.
Like math homework or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. When it comes to your 5-year-old, what are your goals for her relationship with reading? When it comes to reading, what are your goals?
So from my elder child, he really struggled with his reading, and it wasn't until we found books that were to do with superheroes and things that really engaged him, that
Mm-hmm.
he now is an avid reader. So my thing is, I know that she will fall in love with it, because we're from a household that all love
Loves
learning and
reading.
reading. So,
Yeah.
and it will become natural to her. But it's that kind of almost the forced learning. And I
Mm-hmm.
think she sometimes picks up on that. And so I've
Yeah.
kind of had to use it as right, well, we need to do your homework before you can go to the pool. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the incentive I've had to put in order for it to not be too
Yeah.
much conflict.
Okay. So I I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and
Sure.
it is not, I hope that you won't take them in any wrong way, but I just want to push a little bit,
Sure.
because it sounds to me like your ultimate goal for her is for her to love reading, to
Yeah.
find an intrinsic love of reading.
Yeah,
Do you think an intrinsic love of reading is going to happen with those worksheets?
definitely not.
Definitely not. So what would be so wrong with listening to her, helping, really getting curious, understanding
Yeah.
what is it about the reading homework that's so hard? What is it that you don't want to do? Is it the sitting down that's hard? Is it the actual like things that you have to do? Like, and really get granular with her about what's hard about the reading homework. And then supporting her
Mm.
and figuring out a way to either make the homework work for her
Yeah.
rather than incentivizing it,
Yeah.
or finding a way not to do it.
Yeah. So
you know,
we've been on the avoidance thing recently, and yeah, and so we've come to the conclusion that actually I really hope that she would thrive in school this year. And it's been interesting having her in school, but what I found is her personality in school was so far removed from her personality out of school that actually she was suppressing herself. Like basically for the
oh,
first two terms, she
she's
wasn't talking.
masking.
She wasn't
Yeah.
talking at all. And
Oh,
like
honey.
outside of school, she's so confident. And so then she is definitely my child with big emotions. That any emotion she feels, whether or not she's happy, sad, angry, that they're all big. And so for me, her suppressing her emotions all day meant that she then came out of school and, you know, it all came out.
Of course, she's like a volcano ready to explode.
Yeah. And so although she's liked the social aspect, is what I can see in a huge classroom setting is she is so overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been really interesting this year seeing how much peer pressure. So suddenly she went to school and she wanted to get a haircut, and then she wanted to get her ears pierced, and then she wanted to wear trainers to school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been so interesting seeing how impressionable they are, and
Mm-hmm.
and the need to fit in.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds to me like she's a kid who after school really needs to decompress, take
Yeah.
off the mask and decompress. So I guess one of the things that I feel super strongly about is empowering parents to be a squeaky wheel for their kids, seeing their kids' true underlying nature, which you are doing, Amanda, in a beautiful way. And teaching our kids that just because something is the status quo doesn't mean that it's what's right,
Yeah.
and doesn't mean we can't push, right? So the research on kindergarten homework is really shady. They're like, for the most part, the research tells us that homework doesn't start being effective in helping increase kids' learning until the later grades, fourth, fifth, and sixth.
Right.
And so that's something that, like, whenever I work privately with clients, I'm always like, talk to their teacher, see if it's really necessary. Get, and help them learn how to advocate for themselves in the process. Being
Yeah.
able to, a 5-year-old being able to go to an adult and say, I really want to learn how to read, but I also really need time to decompress and play and be with my family after school. And right now, this homework is getting in the way. What can we do? I mean, think about the poise and bravery and courage that you'd be modeling. Some teachers will find that disrespectful.
Yeah.
And so it's really teaching them how to kind of code switch and teaching them how to do that and standing with them as you do it and learning all the phrases. I don't want to disrespect you. It's really important to me, and these things. It's a powerful skill. And
Yeah.
by my daughter, so I've been supporting my children and doing this their whole lives. My 10-year-old, she's 11, just at her wrong age. My 11-year-old consistently does this with her teacher, and her teacher is there for it. And she doesn't need me to do it with her anymore because she's learned the proper language of self-advocacy. There's a rule that she doesn't like at school, where it's a very small class. And boys and girls aren't allowed to hold hands, even if they're just holding hands as friends. And she's like, that is an unjust and unfair rule. How come I can hold hands with my friend who's a girl, but not with my friend with a boy who is a boy? She just doesn't understand it. Her brain is a very black and white thinking brain and stuff. But she is pushing this teacher to come, to have justifiable, true reasons that aren't rooted in patriarchy, you know, or sexualizing children for good good reasons for this rules. And then the teacher is, you know, talking with her, and it's very cool to see her advocating for herself.
That is really incredible. So
But it all starts in so young.
yeah, but so my daughter's teacher, and I kind of said this at the last kind of parents' evening, I think possibly you told her off at some point. And that was the gist that I got. And
Oh.
then the teacher was a bit defensive, and I was like, she is really easy to get around. So, and warm up, like if you've told her off, she's so easy to become friends with, my daughter, that I'm like, you know, you just need to get on her good side again, and for her to not quite be so wary of you. And then I think that you would see her. And
Yeah.
but one of the things that, you know, that I've become really aware of with my daughters, because of the way they feel, is how much that we don't talk about feelings and emotions with our kids, and don't kind of teach them and kind of help them navigate how they might be feeling, and help them express how they might be feeling. Have you got any kind of tips for parents on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, so I think starting with yourself, I think we don't teach our kids that because we don't know how to do it for ourselves. I think it's a really daunting thing to try to teach someone to do something that you don't know how to do yourself. So like, I don't know how to snowboard or ski. I can't teach my kids how to snowboard or ski. Like, I would never attempt to do that, right? If I really was invested in them snowboarding and skiing and me being the one to teach them, I would have to take lessons myself first.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's about learning to do that with yourself, taking time out of your day on a regular basis to notice what you're feeling, going to therapy, kind of doing that work yourself so that you have the language, and then sharing that language with your kids. You know, sharing about if you have a podcast interview coming up that you're feeling nervous about that morning at breakfast, kind of just put your hand on your heart, think, oh, my chest is feeling tight. I think I'm nervous about this interview that I have coming up. Or, you know, oh, I'm teaching a class later today and I'm worried nobody will come. And I'm sometimes even thinking about what that will mean about me if no one comes.
Yeah.
Oh, what can I say to myself, you know? And then kind of have that kind of out loud, not where you're asking them to take care of you, but where you're modeling for them kind of the inner thoughts that we have sometimes. That self-talk is really important, and you can't see it all the time. And it's important to model those things with your partner too. So if my partner comes home and has had a rough day, and I can tell, you know, he's maybe texted me that he's still in academia and he just got a paper rejected, you know, letting them see me come up to him and say, oh man, I'm sorry about your paper. Do you want a hug? Do you want to talk about it? You know, and letting them see that, and letting them see him say, yeah, I'm really disappointed. I was really hoping for that one to get in, you know, and I feel like he has grad students who are on the paper with him, and he really wants them to get published so that they can get good jobs. And, you know, just letting them see those things. So I think the modeling and the starting with yourself and the adults is really important. Doing that first in front of your kids will help them get used to the language. And then starting with your kids during happy and positive moments. I think one of the mistakes that we make as parents is we only talk about big feelings when the big feelings are negative or the kid is in trouble. And so it starts feeling to the kids like this is just something we do when we're getting in trouble or we're lectured because we're doing something wrong. So start off with the really positive stuff, like when you were showing grandma your drawing earlier, I noticed your eyes were just really lit up. What were you feeling sharing that with her? Oh, I was really happy and excited. And, you know, I felt like this buzzing in my heart and in my, you know, helping them really do that during the positive times will make it easier to then bring it in on the times that are harder.
So my 15-year-old, he's going through exams at the moment, and we've done some exams, and he didn't quite get the results that he wanted, but he kind of left it a bit too late to that kind of let me know that he maybe hadn't been paying attention when the lessons had happened, and that he maybe hadn't understood, and that he maybe hadn't done as much work as he should. So it was great that he came to me at that point and I was like, okay, let's work on it and let's see what we can do. But I, in some ways, was actually quite relieved when he got the results that he got, because I felt that he'd got the results that he deserved based on the effort that he put in. And I felt that it was really important for him to get that feeling, to understand what that feeling felt like,
Mm-hmm.
to then go forward and go, actually, that feeling didn't sit well with me. I don't want to feel that again. And for
Yeah.
that to motivate him.
Mm-hmm.
How But he is very much a perfectionist. So he, if anything's less than 100,
Yeah.
even if he only needed 2/3 of that to get the top mark, he judges himself and is really hard on himself. So what could I do to kind of navigate that and help him more?
Well, I think modeling self-compassion.
Yeah.
So letting him see mistakes and letting him see, are you hard on yourself when you make a mistake?
I think sometimes I can be a perfectionist,
Mm-hmm.
a bit, yeah. But I'm working with him on some bits at the moment. So he's just started a YouTube channel, and like kind of getting across to him that a lot of it is just tweaking, and that you might not get that result instantly, but it's the compounding effect. And when you put work in, and that
Yeah.
then that starts to change. So not everything, it's not always, because he is a very black and white child,
Mm-hmm.
that
I
some
think,
things take time.
yeah. So I think really modeling like finding opportunities where you've maybe been a little hard on yourself to notice, hey, I think I'm really digging into perfectionism here. I'm trying to tweak all of these things. What am I really afraid of? Because digging under the perfectionism, usually there's some fear about worthiness,
Yeah.
right? If we do these things perfectly, if we have all these things lined up just exactly right, then it will mean I'm okay, or I'm lovable, or I'm worthy. And so that's the other thing, is uncoupling his sense of self-worth
Yeah.
from his results and exams, right? So that feeling of kind of disappointment and, that natural
Mm.
consequence is good. And it's really important to highlight for him. And it doesn't change the way I feel about you. And it
Yeah.
doesn't change your worth as a person. Really like holding that up. Yeah. You probably, I think you're feeling right now like disappointed in yourself, and that's okay.
So he
And don't let that harm how you actually see your worth as a person. Really make those things crystal clear.
yeah, so he was praised actually for the way he took accountability for it, because I was really pleased that he just didn't blame everything and
Yeah.
everyone. He was like, actually, I was in control of the result that I got.
Hmm.
And that actually he was then able to, we praised him in the fact that, it's done now we move on, and let's on to the next, and that's a good thing. So one of the things that I find when I dealing with mums is their need for control. So even if their cup is almost running on empty and they need a break and they need some help, is still that need for control over whether or not it's the other parent and what the other parent is doing. So I'll give you an example. A mum who was like, oh, I can't possibly have the day off because it's his only day off in the week, and she was absolutely exhausted. But then the children won't eat well, and they'll do this, and I was trying to go, but actually they'll be fine. If they don't eat what you want them to eat, that's okay. But what's more important? And your husband's able to do his job because you support him. Now you need to be able to say, okay, now I need a break. How do women go about doing that more and finding their voice?
I think one of the things that can be helpful is recognizing that we are a walking and living and breathing advertisement for motherhood. And so, especially if you've got girls, but no matter what, we in the act of making time and prioritizing ourselves, letting ourselves have the the very human need for time away, for peace and quiet, for self-care, is giving your kids permission to do so as well.
Yeah.
So if you are raising a 3-year-old girl and she sees you say, Dad's got dinner tonight, I'm off to my yoga class. And she sees you do that once a week for 3 or 4 years, she will be a mom who, if she, is blessed with children and decides to do that, will have no trouble. Maybe yoga won't be her thing. Maybe it's a walk with her, her friend in the morning, or an art class. But doing that in front of your kids is really powerful. And I think it would be wonderful if we could just tell moms to just do it for themselves, because they're actually worthy, because they're full human beings who have a full life and they're not just defined by their motherhood. But moms don't always do that. Sometimes the way in for us is through our kids. And so thinking about that 3-year-old girl right now, in 30 years, when she's a new mom, what do we want her to know? Do we want her to know that it's okay for her to leave her baby with her partner and go to the yoga class? Or do we want her to think that she has to stay and do everything herself in order for it to be right and for her to be okay? I know what I want my girls to know,
And then on the flip side, boys, because
boys too. I mean, it's the same.
So, for example, with my 15-year-old, that I will always ask our nanny basically not to do anything for him, because I'm like, it's my job to make him a good husband. And if I do everything for him, he's not going to be. He needs to be able to pick up after himself. He needs to be able to cook. He needs to be able to take care of himself, because I don't want somebody coming in and he doesn't need a new mum after, he grows up.
And that wouldn't be good for him either,
No. So what can we do to promote healthy relationships where boys are concerned?
I mean, I think it's the very same thing. So a boy who grows up seeing his mom go to that weekly yoga class will expect a partner, if he ends up being partnered with a woman, will expect that partner to also take care of herself and make time for herself. Being able to kind of have out in the open conversations about prioritizing yourself too, I think can be really helpful. The reality is that, the way that we are socialized and the way that gender is kind of socialized in us, women are taught to carry the mental load and do the emotional labor in relationships. And so with a teenage boy, I mean, you've got a lot of opportunity to start helping him see the mental load that perhaps you carry, or even perhaps the girls in his friend network carry. For example, who's organizing when they get together? Who's doing the organizing? Or when one of the group, if he has a multi-gendered group of friends and one of them has a birthday, who's remembering that it's their birthday and making a plan, to get together, and start just noticing those things, pointing it out. It's always Emily who's doing those things. Interesting. Maybe for the next birthday, you should take that on. Find out. Why don't you find out who, and because they need to be taught and socialized to do this. Girls are socialized to do it almost automatically, because we just do that as they're coming up. But boys, we have to put an extra step of effort in, because no one else is doing that. They're not getting that at school. They're not seeing their male teachers doing that. They're not, it's all over. You know what I mean?
And then how do we as mums ease that mum guilt? Because that is so strong, and men do not feel it in the same way.
They don't. I think it would be a mistake to try to get yourself not to have it. And it's probably far better to learn how to sit in it. This is guilt. I'm about to go to this yoga class and I haven't made dinner and I'm feeling guilty about that. Like I'm a bad mom. That hurts and that's painful. All I really want, it's my most important role. All I really want is to be a good mom. And what else is true here? Does making dinner define my motherhood? No, it is. Me going to yoga class actually going to help me be more centered and available at bedtime tonight? Yeah. helps my back not feel so, so hurt, so I can play those roughhousing games that they like on the weekends. This is actually me being a good mom, so it's a lot of self-talk. It's a lot of just sitting with yourself, and we dismiss our feelings a lot. And so just really honoring, yeah, I'm taking on the weight of a culture that wants to keep me here. And that is true. I'm experiencing that feeling is true. And there's other things that are also true. There's other truths, there's no one way to see a situation. But I think that if we try to just convince ourselves and positive, toxic positivity ourselves out of it, it doesn't work. I think we really need to be there for ourselves.
So one of the things that I find is really, really common is, so a lot of us as mums, we want to be there for the initial years. And then obviously our children start going to school. And then if we've been in the privileged position that we're at home and we've been able to give up our careers, obviously generally by the time the children started going to school, our confidence has taken a big, big knock. And so I find that lots of women are really stuck in that place of, do they serve their families, or actually when they know that there's something in them that they still want to achieve themselves, or do they also actually believe that they're worthy of fulfilling their dreams?
Oh, I think that's so hard. I don't know that I have an answer, but I know that I felt that myself. I left a career, and started a business that I could have kind of on the side while I was with my kids. They're in school now, so they're 11 and 8. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think that it is really hard, especially for women who've grown up defining our value and our worth by our relationships with others. Good daughter, be a good sister, a good friend, a good employee, whatever, versus having our value and worth be intrinsic. And I think that ultimately is the deeper problem. Am I making a valuable contribution to the family now while my kids are in school and I'm home during the day? Well, by whose definition, and who gets to say? And what if we were just valuable in and of ourselves just because we're human beings in this world? I think it's an important question, and I don't think that there's a right answer. And I think the grappling with it is the work of of learning to value yourself.
Yeah,
it's hard work though.
Definitely. And I think that even it can be sometimes as simple as having that conversation when you are feeling overwhelmed, having that conversation when your needs aren't being met. And so simple of just going, actually, this is, can you do dinner tonight? Or can you, do the bath and bedtime because actually I need a break? Or we really struggle to be able to say, I need help. And
yeah, I mean, even being able to articulate the help that you do need is a skill in and of itself. Being able to recognize that this feeling is because I have unmet needs, and what are they? It you have to learn how to do that. You have to learn how to go through kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, so are my basic needs for food and shelter and safety met right now? Am I getting sleep? You have to kind of go through those things. And it's so important to understand too that, especially moms to young children, we are often asked in the course of our work as moms to put our basic needs for food, sleep, rest below other people's kind of higher order needs for creativity. The kids who want, the milk in the blue cup, not the red cup, but the blue cup is in the dishwasher, and we haven't eaten anything all day and it's lunch. It's okay to say, actually, I haven't eaten anything all day. I have this basic need for food, and I will be happy to get you your milk if you can wait, or you can have it in the red cup that it's in right now.
Yeah.
It's your choice. And then if there's a meltdown, there's a meltdown, and you can, this is hard. You can be there compassionately while you eat your food, because you're a human being who's allowed to have bodily needs. So I do think it's important to think. I use that hierarchy of needs a
Yeah.
lot in my classes and with my clients, and to help them figure out, okay, so if this is a boundary I need to set for myself to protect my basic needs, it's okay for me to do that. And my
Yeah.
kid does not have to like that I'm not washing the blue cup right now. They can keep the red cup, or they can wait. They have two good choices.
Yeah. And I think we have become almost like, I know me with my children, almost they make a demand sometimes. And it's just instant. And,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of doing things to make them happy, because of course I want them to be happy. But then I'm not always thinking longer term about, actually, if I am always meeting their needs prior to meeting my own, what does that teach them?
And what opportunity are you robbing them of too? So if a 5-year-old is freaking out about the color of the cup, letting them know that the cup's in the sink, you're welcome to grab a stool and wash it if that's the one you want.
Yeah.
And they go and they do it and they learn a new skill. They feel capable. They can do a little of something for themselves. 5-year-olds are always looking for independence. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we take away, when we tiptoe around them and kind of walk on eggshells trying to keep them happy, we rob them of a rich lived experience too. So I'm not saying like, don't go out of your way to make your kids upset, but allow life to happen and be there for them in it. They deserve a rich, full spectrum human experience, and so do you.
Yeah. This conversation has been amazing and really, really insightful. So how can people work with you?
Yeah, so I'm the best way to kind of get in touch with me, or to kind of keep up with what's going on, is on my podcast, The Balanced Parent. And then I do have courses and a membership on my website, laurafroyen.com. The membership is the place where I do the most work with people. So we have conversations kind of like the one that we had every week, in person, in a room together where we can see each other's faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's probably it.
And then on social,
Oh,
where
right, social
where do
media.
you hang out?
I've been very unplugged the past couple months, but I do have a great Instagram page with lots of really helpful videos. So that's Laura Froyen, PhD.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been so insightful. And Laura's podcast, is it a weekly podcast, Laura?
It is normally. I'm taking the summer off though. My kids requested that they not go to any day camps and that I not work. So I am leaning in to a fully present summer.
Okay, well, brilliant. Yeah, you have lots of episodes. So
Oh my gosh, 3
yeah.
years worth of sometimes twice a week episodes. So there's lots to catch up on.
Yeah, so please do go check out Laura's podcast, and that's The Balanced Parent.
Mhm.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura.